the live stream now, and I'll let you know, Chair, as soon as we're up and running.
Thanks.
Okay, Chair, when you're ready, we're now streaming live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual meeting LED monitoring forum on the 23rd of February 2021. I'd like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participants who are disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this meeting is dependent on internet connection, in the event of a break in connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we're not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all phones are turned off or on silent, and make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short, do not repeat points that have already been made, and please do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now mute your microphone when you hear your name? Please confirm by saying present, and when you've confirmed you're present, please mute your microphone again.
Thank you, Chair. So members of the forum, I'm going to call out your name to check that firstly you're present, but then I'm also going to check whether your yes and no voting buttons are working correctly. So bear with me, but it's just a check to see that we're ready for any voting later on. So can I start with Councillor Arnold, please?
Present, Debbie.
Thank you. Can you just either use your green tick or red cross just to check that those are working, please? That's fantastic. That's working. Thank you very much. Councillor Dent.
Present, Debbie. Put on my one.
Thank you. And yours is also working as well. Thank you very
Right,
much.
good.
Councillor Hartnell, I don't see in. Councillor Hawkins as chair, you're obviously here. Can you just check that you're... That's great. That's working. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Councillor Hayward. I'll come back to you, Councillor Hayward, because I'm sure I saw you moments ago. Councillor Johns.
Yeah, I'm here, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Johns, can you just check whether you're able to use your... That's fantastic. I can see that's working. Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Pook.
Yes, I'm here and I'm ticked.
Marvellous. Thank you. And Councillor Rowland.
Yep, present. And
that was working. Yep, I did see it. That's great.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Let me just go back to... I did see Councillor Hayward. Councillor Hayward, are you able to confirm your presence, please?
I am. Thank you. All here. Thank you very much indeed.
Great. Can you just test your either a green tick or a red cross just to check that your voting buttons are working properly for me, please, as well? That's great. I can see that. Thank you for testing that for me. Okay, Chair, I can confirm after all that you are indeed correct. If you'd like to continue. Thank you very much.
Debbie, you missed me out.
Are you a member of the LED forum, Jeff?
I thought I was.
I don't have you down as a member of the forum.
Oh, okay,
oh,
no problem.
Sorry, no, I tell a lie. No, I tell a lie. I've completely missed you. I can see you on one list, and I haven't got you on the other.
I'm always being ignored.
Oh, it wasn't deliberate. I promise you. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, and my tick is working.
And your tick is working. Thank you. Chair, back to you. Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Debbie. Agenda item number 1, public speaking. There are no members of the public registered to speak. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. If there are any members with any comment on the minutes, please raise your electronic hand. If there are no issues, I'll assume that you are content that they are agreed. Any hands, so I'll take those as agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, apologies. Debbie, do we have any?
No, I don't have any apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. This will be done by roll call.
Shall we start with Councillor Jeff Young, just so that I don't forget him? Do you have any declarations, please, Jeff?
No, I don't.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Arnold?
Member of LED, Debbie, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dent?
Yeah, paid up member of LED.
The same, thank you. Councillor Hawkins?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johns?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pook?
None.
Thank you. And Councillor Rowland?
None, thanks, Debbie.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. There are 2 items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way, listed under items 8 and 9. We will take a vote to confirm your agreement to hold these items under Part B.
If I may, Chair. So members of the forum, if you can just use your green tick button if you're in agreement that we take those items under Part B, please. Yep, and everyone's agreed with that. Thank you, Chair. That's agreed. We'll take those under Part B.
Thank you. And then agenda item 7, Sport England, strategic outcomes for Your Place grant application. I'm not sure if that's Charlie or Liz from Strategic Leisure speaking on that item.
Chair, if I kick off,
yes.
Thank you very much. And I'll pass to Liz. First of all, just to welcome Liz Taylor from Strategic Leisure, who's been working with Simon and myself over the last sort of month. And what I want to do is just do a little bit of a scene set and then sort of pass to Liz just to sort of go through the detail. So following the last meeting, there was a recommendation for us or officers to start to sort of develop our thinking for a leisure strategy. And one of those requests was to explore the process for which we should go through to sort of develop the sort of comprehensive leisure strategy I think that the forum's looking for. So Strategic Leisure and myself met with Sport England last week, or certainly a couple of weeks ago now, just to talk about their process, their recommended organisational process for us to follow. And what you have in front of you is a very short paper that, excuse me, that Liz will talk through on the diagnostic process that Sport England recommend that local authorities go through as good practice to be able to sort of develop the leisure strategy for their particular areas. You can see it's a pretty comprehensive process. It's a stage 1. Sport England were very supportive and reassured us that a number of local authorities are going through exactly the same issues as us at the moment. And they reassured us that if we went through this process, that we would have the strategy that we were looking for. So the good news also is that hopefully following this meeting and forum members' approval, we'll be able to secure a grant to be able to process this as well. So that's certainly keep Simon happy as well. So if I can pass to Liz, just to sort of go through the process, to explain a little bit more to members, as I think Strategic Leisure have been through this process a number of times with local authorities, and she's best placed to sort of talk it through and take any questions and answers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liz. Did you want to come on up?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for inviting me this morning to this meeting. I thought it might be useful just to take a step back before we go forward, so to speak. Strategic Leisure, we've been working with a number of local authorities through this period of the COVID pandemic, providing support to local authorities in looking at accounts and what have you. And coming out of this, a number of local authorities are finding that they're needing to review their services, both their built infrastructure and their service provision as a result of the COVID pandemic. So you are not alone here at all. The SOPG process, it sounds a bit convoluted, but it's not. It's quite simple, actually. But I think it was to help Sport England more than anything, because I think they were finding that a lot of local authorities were coming to them with applications for funding for new facility provision, but they hadn't done their homework, basically. They hadn't provided sufficient evidence to support their application. And I think because of this, Sport England have produced this framework to help guide local authorities through the process. So this first stage, which is a diagnostic, is basically a very light touch position statement, which we can give to Sport England to say, yes, we're starting looking at this. These are the gaps, these are the issues, these are the shared outcomes that we've identified. And we feel that there is, we have enough here to produce a leisure strategy or to go forward and do some more work and a full SOPG report. So this is the diagnostic stage, but there is a full SOPG reporting stage as well. So this morning I was just going to quickly run through the process. A lot of it is common sense. So excuse me if it sounds like I'm teaching you how to suck eggs, but we begin basically by taking an overview of your district. And I mean by that, we do a lot of desk research. So we look at the demographics, the health profile, the socioeconomic aspects of your district. And to do that, we look at lots of documentation, your district strategies, your public health strategies, those of other organisations as well. And so we start to get a picture of what needs there are and what joint outcomes there are, what shared outcomes you have. For example, you may have the same outcomes, same objectives as public health, education, you name it. And it's starting to pull that together, identifying any particular trends, any gaps in provision. We also use a tool that Sport England has called Active Places Power and Active Lives to look at how the levels of inactivity in your district. So how many people are doing less than 30 minutes physical activity, those that are doing up to 150 minutes, and those that are doing more than that. And they have that data already, which we can tap into, so we get a good overview of the levels of activity in your district. We spend a lot of time looking at your strategies to see what there is, what there isn't, you know, what your views are, for example, on the active environment, that's cycling, walking. It's not just about built infrastructure that we're looking at leisure and physical activity in its entirety. We also look at your local plan or draft local plan to see what your future housing requirements are for the district and how that will impact on any future leisure provision going forward. Will you have sufficient number of leisure facilities to cater for people moving into the area over the next 10 to 15 years? And we can commission, and not at this stage necessarily, things called a facility planning model, which will basically do some number crunching to identify what your current sports hall and swimming pool provision are in the district and what your future requirements will be in terms of those facilities. We identify what your local priorities are and why these are important to you. What do you want to achieve basically through the provision of physical activity and why? So this is turning things on its head slightly. Rather, we're looking at needs essentially, rather than looking at what you've got now and how you can make that fit. We're forgetting that. We're looking at what you actually need as a district and then planning for that. From there, we agreed shared outcomes, as I've said, regarding to health and well-being, and we'll have identified the gaps in the evidence that we have. So it may be that we need to do further consultation with key stakeholders, with members of the public as well. We may be lacking certain bits of information as to about what your local community needs. Most importantly, and it's quite difficult at the moment, we need to see your leisure centres. We'd love to get out there to East Devon and have a look round your facilities. And that includes your leisure centres and your dual use sites as well. I'm aware that you have a number of dual use facilities. It'll give us the ability to see what state they're in, where they're located, any particular factors around their location, and also look at what goes on in that community around that leisure facility, and is that leisure facility serving that particular need, the need of the residents in that area. We look at what those facilities are delivering in terms of throughput and social value. How well are they used? The current cost of the service as well. Are there any particular facilities that are costing the authority a great deal of money to operate? And we ask the awkward questions as to why you are supporting that leisure facility if it's costing so much. And it may be because it is serving a particular need for the community in that area. We also look at each facility in terms of key strategic factors, whether they meet the local need, community capacity, usage, whether there is any adjacent competition. And we do a competition analysis. So we look at things, for example, gyms in the local area. And I know there's a number of budget gyms now popping up everywhere, and that may be impacting on your income generation potential for some of your leisure centres. We also look at the financial aspects of each leisure centre, how much they're costing, is there any investment opportunity or investment need, and any income generation opportunities as well. Building condition, you may have a number of ageing facilities. Is it advantageous to keep operating those? Is there an opportunity to introduce a new leisure centre, build a new leisure centre, or a co-located facility with other services attached to that leisure centre? And we also look at the catchment areas of your facilities and who your key users are. And it may be that will include schools, particularly with your swimming lesson provision for curriculum delivery, and the dual use management arrangements, whether you have any formal dual use agreements in place with the schools, and those operating hours at those dual use sites. We have a device called a sports facility calculator, which again sounds grand, but it's a means of calculating future need, particularly for health and fitness provision. So it'll identify how many additional fitness stations you will need in your district over the next 10 to 15 years. We will undertake some stakeholder consultation. This might be for the diagnostic, it may be quite high level and not too detailed. We'll rely heavily on yourselves to advise as to who we need to speak to initially. A more detailed full consultation may take place as part of a full SOPG report, which is the next stage on. But we'll still gain quite a bit of information from consultation at this stage. So basically from that, we should identify shared outcomes, gaps in information, and what we need to do to address those gaps going forward, and opportunities. So hopefully we'll end up in that diagnostic giving you a list of options to take forward, which might involve future pieces of work. It's something that we can take back to Sport England and they go, yes, this is looking really good. We'd like to fund the next stage of work beyond that. So it's a real opportunity, and I know that Sport England we're very interested in supporting East Devon. The work itself should take, I'd imagine, between 2 to 3 months to complete. And we will start with a draft report and then a final report, which may well come back to yourselves for discussion. And we will try to keep you in the loop throughout. We will have regular meetings with Charlie and Simon, no doubt, to make sure that we're on course and we're heading in the right direction. That is a very much a whistle-stop tour through the SOPG process, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Going then to committee members, I see, or even non-committee members, I see we've got Councillor Miller with his hand up, please.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Chair. In terms of, I might have missed this and I apologise if I have. In terms of timescales, from your experience, Liz, how long does it take to establish these leisure strategies? I mean, I'm looking at the fact that in East Devon, our last leisure strategy was some 15 years ago, give or take. And I would imagine that because our leisure strategy is so outdated, it's going to take a longer amount of time for us to gather the information that we need. So the reason I ask is because I know from speaking to certain people at LED that the quicker we have a new leisure strategy in place, the quicker LED will be able to attract funding. And of course, you know, their financial position isn't great at the moment. So it'd be good to have an idea of potential timescales from your experience of working with other councils. Thanks.
I'd say I would recommend about 3 months that would be needed to produce the diagnostic. That diagnostic should suffice as a leisure strategy for the borough. It may be, though, that if there are a number of gaps in information, we may then have to do additional pieces of work, and that may extend that time scale. But the initial piece of work should take about 3 months. But I'm conscious, because you know the situation we're in, I understand entirely where you're coming from with regards to LED. We're in unknown territory at the moment.
Thanks, Liz. Councillor Miller, is that happy at that point?
Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm actually surprised that it would take that. I thought it would be longer. So 3 months, I mean, that's great. I mean, I just, you know, as an underline the fact that because we're in this pretty dire situation where the government are, you know, I think LED will be eligible for, I think, 300,000, but I think the spending is over $1 million. They've spent more than over $1 million that they didn't expect to spend due to the pandemic. So these grants from the National Lottery, from my understanding, is dependent on us having an updated leisure strategy. So from my understanding, the sooner we get one, obviously it's got to be right, and it's got to be a proper leisure strategy based on evidence. But the sooner we do it, the better the financial prospects of LED will be. And you know, further to that, I would just like to suggest that the council put as much resources as possible into getting this done as soon as possible as well.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Liz, for that background. I found that very useful. I apologise straight away because I've not been able to read some of the background papers to do with the agenda because I've got some problems with my vision at the moment. So I apologise if the questions I'm going to ask may have been covered elsewhere. But you mentioned about the activity data, which did intrigue me a little bit because I'm just wondering about the source of that data and how you gauge the activity of people that are self-motivated and don't belong to any clubs or organisations where that data can be measured. That's my first question. My second question is really about when you do the diagnostic analysis, is that just covering the sites covered by Leisure East Devon, or is it covering all the leisure facilities within the district, and perhaps also looking at underutilised buildings that may be in the ownership of other local authorities or the NHS. I'll give you an example to illustrate what I'm talking about, and it's going to sound a little bit parochial, but in Sutton, for example, we've got a hospital site which is, because of the loss of hospital beds, is underutilised at the moment, and we have been trying to work to provide a health and wellbeing hub at that area, in that site, which would tie in with what we're trying to do with leisure facilities as well. So far we have been unsuccessful, but I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity here to also be looking at sites like that as to whether what potential that has to actually help with this particular issue at the moment as well, particularly in terms of the current pandemic and the extra pressures that that's providing for people that need to be looking to the future for their health and well-being.
Thank you, Councillor. If I can answer the first question, the information, the data we get from Sport England is essentially from their Active Lives survey. So I understand that they undertake this on an annual basis. They do a phone survey, which is independent, and they obtain so many respondents per area. So it is quite cross-cutting. So it's I don't know how they determine who they contact to fill that survey. I think even I've had a survey in the past few years, and it's quite detailed, and it asks a number of the same questions in different ways. So it is quite a large representative sample for each area of the country. With regards to your second question, we would look at leisure in its widest sense. So we would not just look at the facilities that the council have responsibility for and are involved in, but we'd look at wider provision in the area, what competition there is, what opportunities there are, and possible duplication of resources at the moment. It may be that a number of providers are, providing the same service, and it may be better to join up. Or, if one person's doing it, why should we be doing it? Can they do that better than we can? Is their facility more appropriate to delivering that? So, yes, we would look wider than just the council's own leisure provision. I hope does that answer your question?
It does. Thanks very much, Liz. Thank you.
Thanks. Next on the list, I've got Charlie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick response on Councillor Miller's point about timelines. I just wanted to make everyone aware that strategy development really needs to tie in with our plain pitch strategy review, which is an ongoing issue right at the moment, and it's absolutely critical that the two are seen in sync. And I've asked Matt Dickens, Planning Policy Manager, to present to the next forum meeting to ensure that we've got that join up. I know that he's taking a report to Strategic Planning Committee, I think it's today or tomorrow, but I think the forum needs the opportunity just to sort of understand the sort of symbiotic relationship between the two documents, because that plain pitch strategy will throw up a number of issues that our leisure strategy needs to be cognizant of. So I just wanted to sort of throw that in and or reassure members that process is in train. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Next is John Golding, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask how, Liz, you go about during this diagnostic process to ensure that we produce something that's really ambitious, but also is affordable and realistically capable of being delivered because of the cost constraints, the financial constraints that we and other local authorities are under when it comes to leisure provision? So we'll have loads of ambitions, I've no doubt, but what can we actually afford to deliver and how that comes out during this diagnostic process? Thanks.
That's what we're about, basically. Strategic leisure. We would ensure that we know completely where local authorities are at the moment and how tight finances are, and that any recommendations we put forward should be, economical, achievable and sustainable as well for the local authority. So our recommendations in nowhere will we be putting anything forward that is unnecessary and over-ambitious and not necessarily needed either. I think we will spot check throughout our work to ensure that this is actually what we want, and we may actually come forward with solutions which will save you money. It won't necessarily always cost you money, but it will actually save you money. There may be better ways of delivering your service which could actually save you money, and that's what's prompting a lot of local authorities to go through this process. But I understand entirely where you're coming from. So we will not be putting any sort of high-flying ideas forward for 50-metre pools and the like, unless we know that it's actually affordable to have these facilities. But it's all about need, essentially. I keep ranting on about it, but it's basically, what does your district actually need? Who are your vulnerable groups? What do they really need? Who are you serving? Who are your priority groups, and how can we get them to use your services and use your facilities? And it may be that it might be a combination of both facility provision and outreach provision into the community. And I know that LED are already doing that very well. So it may be that one of the outcomes of the report is that we don't necessarily need to do anything in terms of outreach work going forward because it's well provided for at the moment. But until we start the process and we identify what the issues are, that's difficult to gauge.
Thank you. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Liz, for your explanations. Some of the points have already been covered. Clubs and private venues was one of the questions I had. Tourism and activities, as we're a tourist destination and we want to increase that, there are some sports and activities that would be benefit to tourism. Neighbouring authority offers, there is a new pool being built in Exeter. Now, would we need to have a pool right on the boundary of Exeter, or would we share that? Water sports down here, now there's a lot of water sports activities. How does that meet the criteria? And I get confused sometimes where a pastime is a sport and where a pastime is an activity. I do a lot of walking. Is that a sport? Is it activity, or is it a pastime? We have wonderful coastal paths and stuff, and so would that be included, or would that be separate? Thank you.
Thank you. Tourism, that's an interesting one. So we're about to start a huge SOPG project with Cornwall, who share a lot of similarities to yourself, big tourism industry. Yes, we will be looking at the impact of tourism and the seasonal nature of some of your provision, if you have facilities that are on the coastal locations, and that impacts on your income generation. So you have a tourist community around at summer time and holiday periods, and it's whether those facilities are sustainable outside of those time slots. Neighbouring authorities, I'm doing an SOPG project in Maidstone Council, and they adjacent to them is Tunbridge Wells, and so we're looking at the provision in neighbouring Tunbridge Wells because they're looking to build a leisure centre very close to the border with Maidstone, and that might impact on what Maidstone decides to do with its own leisure centre provision as well. So yes, we will be looking at neighbouring provision. I wouldn't worry too much and to get too hung up about terminology. We're looking at health and physical activity in its widest sense. So we're not looking purely at formal sport. We're looking at walking, cycling, any means by which you raise your heart levels and undertake exercise of some sort, whether you're consciously doing or unconsciously doing it.
Thank you. Councillor Pook, then I've got Councillor Arnold on this item. Please.
Oh, okay, thank you, Chair. Fully endorse and support the idea of actually really understanding what we need, and also understanding that it'll be in sort of graduated, from the gold plated to the affordable. But I hope you also take this opportunity, and this is, you've actually got it down, the current cost of the service. The costs of providing LED support, LED services throughout the county, the district, have always been, or to my knowledge, have always been a bit confused, because we got the grants, we got the actual cost on the ground of Peter's team, but the one that's been always a bit sort of disguised, makes it sound like intentional, but lost within the other sort of the asset side, is the cost of those assets. So I hope that when you address that bit, the current cost of the service, working closely with Tim and Simon, and extract all these costs, because I've always thought that it's an essential service we provide, but we don't really clearly identify a budget and what we can afford. And I think going forward, we're going to have to be even more careful on understanding what we can afford to go forward. So it's just really sort of a reminder that there's more to the cost of LED, is more than just the grant we give, and more than just Peter's team doing it. There's all those buildings which Tim's looking after, some street scene look after it. It's a bit of a confused, to my mind. It might not be to Tim, but just highlighting that side. And I'm sure Tim's nodding there and Simon's smiling.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think we're already identifying some of those costs through the work we've done with the COVID support work we've been undertaking on behalf of your authority. But yes, so we appreciate that there's wider costs to just the contract cost itself. It's the building costs, the maintaining of those facilities, and everything around that envelope as well. So yes, we will take all costs into consideration, so we know the full implications of the cost of those facilities.
Thank you. And then finally, Councillor Arnold, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for just being that strange little artist formerly known as Prince Symbol there, but my bandwidth is very bad today. Thank you, Liz, for all of this. It's been absolutely fascinating. I just wanted to do two things very quickly. First of all was to agree very strongly with what Councillor Pook has just said. And the more that members are able, and officers, to see in one place all of the assets, all of the costs of the assets that are associated with that, as well as all the various revenue funding elements, the more helpful that'll be. So thank you for that. The second thing I just wanted to ask, I suppose by way of an example, was so if we look at Axminster, for example, which has its Flamingo Pool, which is a charity, which doesn't receive any subsidy of any kind from us as a district, and yet in this area of the district provides really the only swimming provision, and it's creaking at the moment post-COVID, and it's an amazing organisation, because what it does every year is throw the Axe Vale Festival, and all the takings for that go to subsidise the running across the year. Now, this may be becoming I hope it isn't, it might be becoming an unsustainable way of moving forward with a facility such as that. So my question is, I'm assuming from what you're saying that they're the kind of people you'll ring up and go in and have a chat with. But I'm wondering what you think their expectations might then be if we're engaging with them and effectively saying, you know, what are your problems and what do you need? So how do you deal with, you know, sort of expectation management, I suppose, in known difficult circumstances?
That's a good question, actually, raising expectations. I think we just need to make clear that the work we're doing is purely a diagnostic study, so it's quite high level. So it's, I think it should always be couched under the headings of providing a leisure strategy for the borough. So I think we would make clear that doesn't necessarily mean that there's money en route to support provision. It's not always, the answer isn't always throwing money at something as a solution. And I know that's quite difficult at the moment because we're in a COVID, coming out of COVID, and a lot of these providers are on their knees, understandably. But I think, yeah, I think it depends on the situation. I think as long as we're clear on what we're asking these organisations prior to having that discussion with them, and I think I would share that with Simon and Charlie before we go in and talk with these organisations to ensure that that we don't raise their expectations, you know, inappropriately. I can't really answer that because I think naturally most people are always hoping that there'll be some money coming out of it for them, or some redevelopment or some improvement. But I think if we say we're looking at everything in its entirety across the borough and couch it in general terms at this stage, I think that would be the best approach. And we want their views not just on their own facility, but on the district's provision as a whole. So it's not just looking in on themselves, but it's also asking them for their views on how leisure is provided across the district. So I think we'd probably deflect off themselves slightly and onto the district needs as opposed to their own needs.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Sorry, that was a bit abstract, wasn't it? Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thanks. I've got 2 more hands just popped up. Councillor Denton and Councillor Johns, please.
Assume you mean me first. Yes.
Yes, please.
One of the things about the initial review that you plan to take, I just make sure I ask that the Budley Wellbeing Hub is taken into consideration as well, because that's the old cottage hospital that we had has closed down, is now a wellbeing hub. It's managed by West Bank, the other side of the river. It has a gym, which is not LED, but is well used. It provides a considerable amount of social provision. They have a catering unit manned by people with learning difficulties. They run a unit for the elderly. They have NHS clinics, and they have a childcare unit. So it's a complete well-being and activity hub that needs to be considered in the overall picture. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Councillor Johns.
Thank you. So my understanding is that we're looking at what East Devon can provide for its residents, etc. And apparently, you know, and we're looking at East Devon itself. So I'm assuming things like LED, things that are run by East Devon. Are we taking into account things like, for example, social prescribing that's now being pushed by the government, where things like you've got men's shed and all those kind of activities? You know, you've got the walking groups, you've got the local cricket clubs and all those kind of things where they may use the LED facilities in the winter for, say, for example, training, when obviously you're allowed and there's no pandemic. Is that all being taken into account? Because obviously those aren't technically LED things. They're things that may use the facilities once a month or however, just for the winter period. Are we taking into account all of the other groups? Because I know that you said earlier that, you know, you would look into things like if, for example, in Ottery, we've got an LED, but we also have another gym that's opened up just down the road from that. So I'm assuming that you would take that gym into account. However, if you take that gym into account, surely you would also need to take into account all the other sports and recreation facilities that are available in Ottering. And I'm just using Ottering as an example because obviously that's where I live. But we have things like a bowls club, a cricket club, a football club, karate, judo, and all those kind of things. Are they all taken into account in this? Because I will declare an interest. My husband's trustee of the local cricket club. But obviously all of these things need to be taken into account for things that are already being provided by voluntary services, as it were, or voluntary groups. So would they be taken into account? That's all I'd like to know, especially with the government pushing very much so at the moment for social prescribing and, people going out and joining activities as opposed to being stuck at home when they can. And also, obviously, during the pandemic, everybody's probably noticed on their local Facebook pages the amount of all the old Joe Wicks coming up and doing all the social online keep fit exercises and stuff. Will these be taken into account? Just something that I'm curious to know. Thank you.
Yeah. So what we're doing is a diagnostic at this stage, so it's quite high level. So we will make reference possibly to those groups and say we're aware that this is going on. I don't think we'll go down to perhaps the level of detail that you might be thinking that we're going to go down into, but I think it's to give a position statement, an overall picture of provision at the moment. So yes, we'll touch on those groups, those organisations, and we'll probably need yourselves to actually make us aware of those organisations that we need to talk to. So it'd be good if for you to assist us in that process, and we will make contact with them. But it's, yes, social prescribing. Yes, we will want to know what's going on in the community, what organisations are active in your community, so that we do have that overall picture of provision. So yeah, not just the facilities, it's what's going on in the community. And apologies for my phone going then.
All right. No, thank you. I think that's really useful going through that process. This does seem to be a great opportunity for us to find out just where we are today, and then we can start to see some of those things we didn't even probably know were an issue might have been an issue. And I think it's been mentioned that this stage gets fully funded by Sport England, which will be nice, at least in principle. Charlie, are you looking for a recommendation from the forum to pursue this SOPG?
Yes, Chair, because following this meeting, we want to formally write something. I think that's right, Liz, to be able to sort of trigger the process to obviously secure the funding, very importantly, and two, to follow their processes. So yes, please.
Great. On that basis, then I'm happy to move from the chair then that we pursue with the SOPG diagnostic, if I've got those letters the right way around.
Happy to second, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. On that basis, we can use ticks, which I think are working again. Or crosses, if you so wish.
Don't speak too soon.
Okay, for the benefit of viewers watching online, the vote is now taking place. So, Chair, with 8 votes in favour, that is carried.
Thank you. We are supposed to go into part B for the next part. I just wanted to check with Peter if there was anything you wanted to mention around the LED update following the Prime Minister's statement last night while we're in the public section, or if you would, sorry to put you on the spot a bit, it's just popped into my head during the last item, that's all.
No, I think we'll cover it in the part B because it impacts on what we're going to do and cost to the council.
Of course, no worries. On that basis, then, if we're leaving for Democratic Services to move us into part B, happy to break as well generally for everybody and come back at 10:25.
So,
only a 4 minute, but
yeah,
should we have
Chair,
time?
can you just do the formal words?
Formal wording, sorry, I was
Please.
trying to do it on the quick and easy. Let me find.
You can deliver them as rapidly as you like, but we must deliver them.
That's fine. I moved my phone onto a different part. Give me a minute.
whilst you're doing that, Chair, I just want to say thanks to Liz, by the way.
Yes, here,
and just
here.
thank you for your contribution, and looking forward to working with you.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's bought a bit of time for the Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Generally.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Liz.
Debbie, is it possible, forgive me, my IT's in a bit of a mess today. Have you got the Part B report in an easily emailable form? If you see what I mean.
Verbal reports, I think.
They're both verbal reports.
Oh, it's just verbal. That's why I couldn't find it. Thank you.
Okay.
I found the wording now.
Oh, well done. Thank you.
Apologies. So the next part is under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting as exempt information of the description set out in the agenda is likely to be disclosed, and on balance, the public interest is in discussing this item in private section. Part B, members, we will take a short break while the live stream is